Hey everybody, give me a second here because I'm just about to start a stream, and it's going to be a strategy session today, but I'm just trying to figure out how to share a particular stream. I think I figured it out. So give me one sec and I will kind of post this out there. Oh, it's just my normal thing. Never mind. Okay, one sec. I'm going to announce these streams and then we'll get started. One more to go. Okay, cool. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so I'm really excited to basically have the last session here, the last strategy session that's focused on the URP series, the Universal Resource Point series for Age of Innovation. I've already kind of previously gone through the URP and kind of talked about how it came to be. There are some evolutions and tweaks in this version, so I'll talk about those a little bit. But previously we kind of covered competency tiles, we covered factions, and I was a little stuck on the palaces for a while, and I'll talk about sort of some of those tweaks and why I was stuck and how I kind of got unstuck with some of the tweaks I made to the URP. So excited to look at the palaces. Also town tiles, pretty quick one there, just kind of not too complicated, but it is kind of, to me, interesting to see how balanced they are given the values in the URP, which kind of makes me feel like the URP values are kind of good and okay. And then innovation tiles. So again, this one I kind of puzzled over for a while because it didn't seem right to sort of rank them all together because there's kind of two categories. At first I was thinking, oh, there's econ ones versus VP ones, but then I decided actually there's kind of more early game innovation tiles and there's more late game innovation tiles. So I broke it up that way, and that's how we'll look at it. So to start, let me jump right down to the palace tiles, and I'm going to sort of talk about one of the key tweaks that I made this time around to the URP. So you might recall that last time around, spades were valued at 5. So I got that. I remember talking to Aaron Weber, and I was like, hey, what should spades be? He says, 5, and because it seemed right from in a TM world, it seemed right for most of this. But as I was kind of ranking the palaces, the double dig palace was number 1 by like a fair margin, and it just didn't feel right. Like, as I started thinking about AOI, there are so many spades in this game. You can get them all over the place. You can get them from the towns. You can get them from palaces. You can get them from innovations. You can get them from using your books with a book action. You can get them from a competency, like building a school can get you one. So I believe that the value of spades should be lower. So I made that adjustment. And as a result, it actually affected the science step calculation as well, because the science step kind of looks at the various rewards you get from the science track. So a little bit of an adjustment there, but not like a huge deal. And actually, I actually do have an updated slide on the digs. So yeah, so the new kind of URP view on digs is that I decided to put it in between the value of the 3 book URPs. So it allows you to get 3 books, which is worth 10.5 URP, gets you 3 spades. And that means that 1 spade equals 1 book equals 3.5 URP. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got your 4 power spades. So 4 bull 3 power is equal to 4 coins, which is equal to 1 spade. So in that case, 1 spade equals 4 coins or 4 URP. And right in between that value is 3.75. So same value as a scholar. I don't think it's that controversial. I think, in TM, spades are really tight and just so important. And I do think, kind of like tools, in the early game, spades are more valuable, and then they sort of diminish as time goes on. So interested to hear feedback on that, but I'm feeling pretty satisfied with this. I think it was definitely too high at 5. Is it 3.75? Is it 4? Debatable, right? But something to work with. So that's where we landed. And as I said, it did kind of lower the science steps value a little bit because I'll just jump. Here's the bus slide. Jump here for a second to explain it. So essentially, part of the value of the science step is averaging out the rewards that you get, and the spade rewards are now worth a bit less. The average is a bit less, and then we multiply it by that 1.46 multiplier, which is explained in all that text over there. We have another episode specifically on URP, so if you want to cover it there, you can. Okay, so that said, let's jump right back to the palaces and take a look. You got a little preview a second ago. All right, so I've got them separated into 2 slides just because they didn't fit on one slide, but this is the top half of palaces. So at the very top, one of my favorites, and perhaps this will be controversial, but is palace number 3. So that's the school downgrade palace. I may have talked about this before, but this palace is hilarious because originally we thought it was, my playgroup thought it was like the worst palace. Thought, oh, maybe there's somebody can figure something out, but situationally, but we thought it's pretty bad. Turns out it's actually very strong. And so to kind of capture the value here in this methodology, and I talked about this a little bit before, I've added this sort of new piece to the URP, which I think I talked about in a prior video, but it's the how many competencies can you get greater than the 5 that you would typically get. And the 5 you typically get is, when you build 3 schools, and then you build a university, and then you build another school. So that's the 5. Some of them, like monks, that's where I talked about before, monks are a -1 because you get 1 less, and then some of them, like inventors, are a +1. And then this one, I've sort of argued that, you could get 4 additional competencies, so 9 competencies total, and I valued that at 7.1 URP per. And I kind of went through that over here to explain where it came from, but in a nutshell, what I'm saying is we're taking the average value of competency tiles in the last round and saying, and not counting the ones that are worth nothing, and using that as the value of those incremental competencies. So that's how I came up with the value, and it's basically the reason why Palace 3 is the best. So just to go through it here, we're kind of assuming we build it in round 1. Don't have to, actually, I think I was, no, in this case I assumed we build it in round 2. It is so good, it's Scooby Bombs, I agree. But I'm even saying you build it in round 2, because in round 1 you're going to want to build a school. So it doesn't do anything by itself in round 1. So that's why I'm saying expected usage is 5. So push the button 5 times for 5 rounds. That'll get you 15 victory points off the bat. It'll get you 5 tools. Also gives you power, so you're getting income for 4 rounds in this scenario. And like I said, 4 incremental competencies is what I'm estimating. It doesn't always, get you that. You kind of have to also build a bunch of other schools and university and whatnot. But I think it's reasonable. So to me, best palace. I think everything is situational in this game, of course, but I feel pretty good about calling that one the best palace. I think some people might argue with me. I've heard, the AOI champ, Brandon Bowie, or otherwise known as Brutestar, he's pushed back on this one a little bit, so interested to hear what you have to say about it. Okay, next, palace number 4. So this is the sort of swarmling ability. Upgrade your workshop to a guild for free. Quite valuable in the sense of it's worth 2 tools and 3 coins every round. I'm assuming this one you build in round 1. I think this is a good round 1 palace to build because sometimes you can build, you can squeeze out like a school in first round, but just has so much value. So expected usage is 6. You're going to push the button 6 times. You'll also get that power income for 5 rounds. And it's just a really good econ palace. It's, I guess, the best econ palace. 59 URP, all econ, no victory points, so quite strong. And then we get to palace 13, another kind of one that I'm a big fan of. It's a weird one in the sense of, it's a bit of a smorgasbord of like econ and victory points. So I'm again kind of in this case assuming you build it round 1, so you get to push that 3 coin and 1 book button 6 times. And then you get you can get victory points as well. So I'm kind of saying that your expected usage here is you're going to build guilds 6 times to get yourself 18 victory points. You'll also, of course, get the coins and the books. So all of it kind of adds up to quite a lot of overall URP, 57 URP plus VP. And I often look to this one, and also like number 3, but 13 particularly, if it's a low scoring track, sometimes it's nice to have your own sort of point generation. So 13 can totally do that. Also, it's kind of cool to combine with guild rounds, and if there's a guild pass tile, getting 9 victory points per guild and doing that 4 times in a round is pretty backbreaking. Okay, so next we've got the palace number 6. So that's the one that gives you 2 steps, a button for 2 steps on the science track. Also gives you income of 2 power and 1 book. So good, definitely a very good one. I think once upon a time this was the top one on the list before I valued palace 3 correctly. So lots of value there. I'm assuming you build it in round 1, and you're getting 5 books. You're going to get 10 power and those 12 steps, which are quite valuable. 2.29 URP per step. So 49.9, really strong, and sort of the second best econ palace. Next we've got palace 1, and theme here is like none of these are bad. Actually, they're all really good. And if you're coming from TM, where lots of strongholds are garbage and you shouldn't build them, I don't think any of them are like that in AOI. But this one anyway gives you 5 power. So is it 4? I can't even read right now, but I think it's 5 power. That's right, 5 power and a button for 2 tools. It's a lot of tools. It's like push the button 6 times if you build in round 1, so you get 12 tools. So quite a lot of econ as well, almost as good as 6. And of course, depending on type of game you want to have, they're very different kinds of econ, so you can sort of go in different directions. I have a very soft spot for number 7 as well. I do love this one. I'm calling the expected usage 13, and sort of the way I get there is, and maybe this is a little aggressive, I'll admit, but I'm sort of saying, okay, you build, you have your 2 schools and your palace up by round 2. That part's maybe a little aggressive, and then by round 3. And then you have 3 schools up by round 4. So you could kind of stagger it a little bit too and get to the same place. But you can get a lot of victory points here. So this is I think the best pure victory points, not pure victory point, but the best victory point palace. So in this scenario, you'd be getting 39 victory points from the palace. Also, I noted it here, it goes really well with the school innovation, because you can really power out, you can get 12 victory points a round in that scenario. Also, you get some power income as well. So great palace, another kind of great victory point generator if you're in a game where there's not that many victory points in the rounds. Okay, so let's move on to Palace 12. So, for the TM players, and we sort of thought it too when this first came out, it's like, wow, there's no Earth 1 in this game, and this is Earth 1. But it's kind of, I think it's right to be sort of on the lower, well, I guess it's not the lower end because it's the lower end of the top half of the palaces, so it's probably about right. But it's not as good as we originally thought, because it sort of just says, you're going to earn X amount of extra victory points. The expected usage I put as pretty aggressive. I think 13 workshops. I think it's totally doable. But it's if you could get a lot less if you don't really take advantage of it and really expand. But it's and also one thing to note is that 8 power is a lot. I think it's the most power income of any of these palaces. So I remember it kind of goes nicely with Illusionists. So it's one to potentially pair together. And then we've got Palace 14. So this seems to me to be too low. I think it's not the tempo that you get building this early and getting 2 ship advance early. Not to mention the 2 books that comes with it. It's a great way to get a round 1 innovation. I think all of that is not fully factored into this. So I believe that this is higher up the list, should be higher up the list than it is, but definitely willing to hear what people think. I mean, first of all, you get the 6 power, so not too shabby there. The way I've sort of calculated the value is the expected value is 2, meaning you get 2 bumps up your sailing upgrades, and so that's value of 1 scholar and 4 coins for each upgrade, so that's 2 scholars and 8 coins. You also get the 2 books I mentioned. You get the 2 victory points as well for that first upgrade. So really good palace, but even better to sort of have a jump on everyone in terms of sailing. So lots of positional and tempo rewards that are not quite valued in the URP. And then we've got Palace number 9, the one that made me revalue spades, really. It just didn't feel right to have this one at the top of the list. And I didn't even talk about the Mermaid Town Schoolmoms. Thank you. Like, it also gives you Mermaids Towns, which is a whole nother thing. And I did sort of count some value there. I gave it, what did I say here? Right, so I gave you the value of 2 bridges, because I'm assuming you kind of save a couple of bridges there, especially if you're black. That works. Yeah, I agree. I think this is better than 12. And anyway, maybe at some point I'll think of a fun way to value in that tempo, but we can also just talk about it. Anyway, so the double dig palace, middle of the pack, to me feels right. I think every single dig you get from this, as you go through the rounds, the digs sort of become less exciting. Sometimes you don't always have a good spot to do 2 digs. It can be good, and I look to this more. If you have a track that really, will pay you for expanding a lot, it can be good that way. But yeah, middle of the road to me feels right. Okay, so let's move on to the bottom half here. Okay, so first one on the bottom half is Palace number 5. So this is, you're right, Goblins, exactly. Goblins, Screaming Mom, thank you for that. Goblins loves this palace, great combo. It's like 4 coins in addition to the 2 digs every round, so I agree. that one goes beautifully together. It's also good to like get your sailing up so you can kind of better take advantage of your digs and not have to do weird, useless digs. Okay, so next up here is Palace 5. So this is the one, and I find a lot of people like this one a lot. I always felt slightly underwhelmed by it, but it gives you the 4 power income, but then it gives you a competency. So strictly speaking, it's kind of worse than building a school, but the thing about it is, it gives you 1 more competency than you would otherwise get, so that it gets that value of an extra 7.1 URP. That's part of it. But also, it's a good way to get a round 1 innovation. So I think that's why a lot of people kind of jump on it. I feel like it gets a little overvalued, to be honest. So I think it's in the right spot, kind of middle of the pack, but I don't think it's that great. Number 10 here, so Palace number 10, 6 coins, 12 immediate power, and 2 immediate books. This one's very good. Like it sort of came out lower than I expected. Again, it's one of those ones that allows you to get that round 1 innovation because you build your palace, you get 2 books, so it helps that. The 12 power can also help in that direction if you happen to need, to do a power conversion for a book or something. But the 6 coins are a lot, and kind of if it paired with the right faction and the right sort of setup, so maybe a low coin type setup, can be really powerful. It can sort of save you from needing to spend a bunch of power actions on coins or even book actions on coins. Also, kind of like the faction I kind of really like it with sometimes is moles, or any kind of faction like where you might want to do, or situation where you might want to do like a dwelling rush, and really kind of build out your tool economy and just have the coins there. It can be quite cool. And yeah, I agree. I think a whole another thing around, is it good to do a round 1 innovation? It's a whole another thought process. I've seen it go well and I've seen it go really badly. It kind of depends. So it is tough to quantify, I agree. But anyway, Palace 10 I think is quite good. In my opinion, probably a little better than the ranking here. Then we move on to Palace 16. So this is kind of a weird one, I guess. I think it does something that's kind of pretty new. Allows you to just sort of airdrop a guild anywhere on the board that's your color. You don't have to be connected or anything like that. But it does have to be your color already. So I never thought, and also gives you 2 power income and a book income, but I never thought this was particularly good. I'm actually kind of surprised that I would have thought it would be maybe a little lower. But yeah, the way I sort of valued it, and it's a good point here. So I'm going to talk about the actual guild itself. And I, for all of the neutral structures, and this isn't a neutral structure, but sort of these additional structures, what I did is I sort of valued them. Oh, actually, I have to make one. I didn't assume Power Town. I assumed a Science Town. Okay, so what I'm saying is, when you get the extra structure, that extra guild, I'm saying that's 2 sevenths of a town. So it's like 2 power towards a 7 power town. And so for that value, I'm saying, okay, you get the 2 sevenths of a town reward, and the best town reward you'll see is a Science Town. So that's why you'll see 1.1 science steps here, because that's 2 sevenths of the 4 science steps you get, and then also victory points. 2 sevenths of the 7 victory points you get is 2. So that's one part of where the value comes from. The other part of the value is the actual guild, which costs 2 tools and 3 coins, plus the book income and the power income. So that's how we kind of came up with it. And you'll see when I talk about the innovations later, that's this sort of concept of what percentage of a town reward is. I use that a few times. Also, I used it on the tower competency, which I think was an update from before. Okay, so let's move on to number 9, the Fakir Palace. So, or even the fixed Fakir Palace. So basically, I always thought this was a pretty cool palace initially. A little less hot on it these days, only because, you know, you can definitely score a lot of points with it. I look to this palace in situations where you might have a last round edge scoring or last round workshop scoring. Anything that you can really, you know, really maximize the value of workshops. I mean, you can get to a point where you might be able to do like 15, 16 victory points per workshop if you kind of plan it right. But one of the downsides of this palace is every time you sort of use it, you need to use your scholars, and your scholars can be worth a lot. They can be very valuable on the science track. So the way that I value this one is, so first of all, I'm assuming 6 uses per game, which I think is, you could do better, you could do worse, but 6 seems reasonable. I'm also including the value of 2 sailing upgrades, because if you do it right, you shouldn't have to upgrade sailing at all, because you're all connected with anything you can jump to 2 from. So it's not too tough to do that. So that's 2 scholars and 8 coins. And then, and I subtracted the 2 books and the 2 victory points because you're not upgrading, so you don't get that value. That's why you see those negatives. I'm also subtracting 1.5 steps for each scholar used for jumping. So some scholars you're going to send for 3s, some you're going to send for 2, and some you're going to send for a single bump. So I kind of landed on the 1.5 steps just to show what is the downside built in to this palace. You're going to, you know, have less, be able to use less scholars for going up science. And so I think that's a fair kind of way to value it, because it's got the upside, but I think this downside is important to call out. So to me, it seems like, you know, pretty good spot for this palace. Okay, so then we've got Palace 8, which is the Fire 2 Palace, which actually I probably think is the worst one, not counting the Beginner Palace. But it's sort of landed a little bit higher here, but definitely on the lower end of palaces. So, you know, the way I valued it here was I did, you know, 1/7 of a town reward times 2 for the Fire 2 aspect of the palace. So that kind of, again, assuming a science reward here. And I said 2 because you probably don't need to do 3, you know, Fire 2 towns. One of them's probably, you could have, assuming 3 towns is sort of normal. I'm kind of saying, well, you probably get the value of it for 2 towns, maybe not 3. So, you know, arguably it could be a little higher, but that's one part of the value. And the other part of the value is, of course, the income, which is, you know, not insignificant. 2 coins, 1 tool, and 2 power per round. So I will say that I saw a cool game at TMCon where somebody used this along with lizards to do some kind of really fun stuff. Lizard chaining towns and all that. So fun town, but I don't think it's particularly good. Or not town, but palace. And then there's Palace 11. So this one I really think is potentially in totally the wrong spot. I think this palace is actually quite good. Of course, it's particularly good paired with lizards and felines because of the bonuses you get when you have a town. It also is really good at letting you get up the science track and win science quicker, because you're going to have a jump. It's almost like well, what am I in Terra Mystica, the 2 key town in a way. It sort of gets you a key very quickly, but when I'm valuing it, what I'm basically getting here is that you've got the 5 tools from an income perspective. I chose the the science step palace because it's the most valuable one from a URP perspective. But yeah, that sort of tempo and it is not really built into this fairly, I think. So this one I do believe is higher, and of course, like everything situationally can be really good with the right situation and the right faction. Okay, and then we've got Palace 15, which I think people seem to like a lot. I don't know. I think everyone's lured by that round one innovation, and it sort of helps that. And it also just feels kind of cool. Like you can really expand kind of quickly in round one, but I think it's actually right. I don't think this is a particularly good palace compared to the rest. You're gonna get the 6 power per round. You're gonna get 2 spades one time and 2 bridges. I counted the bridges here as 3 power each. So in the end, doesn't really give you that much. So I think it's not incorrect to be on the lower end here. Hey Snake, how you doing? Don't worry, you can watch the YouTube video earlier, but what you missed, just to recap, we just went through the palaces. We went through my tweak to URP, which brought the value of spades down to 3.75. That's about it so far. And so now I'm dumping on the... Do you like that one, Snake? Do you like the Bridge Palace? For me, not so great. Okay, now we're going to go through the town ones. Yeah, we talked about that. It's hard to sort of evaluate the explosive nature of it. If you get, helps you get a quick town. Actually, I want to just maybe I'll make one more point on explosive town stuff. I have seen Palace 16, although I think it's like right to be not a particularly good palace. I have seen some cool stuff with red, where you sort of start in the middle and start in the east, and then use that to build out in the west and get some quick towns going. So you could do some cool stuff. But you're right, Snake. It does help with the round one innovation. I guess the round one town too. That's the other piece of it. And I suppose you can get the boost. Usually people take the 3 tool town to get things going. So, definitely willing to listen to some healthy debate on that one. But let's move on to the towns. So actually the thing about the towns here that kind of interests me the most, makes me feel kind of good about the URP values, is that they're all, outside of the science town, it's all pretty balanced. So like that seems to me like it makes me feel like the URP is kind of close to being right if this was the intention of the design. So and I do feel like the values, the victory point values in AOI for these compared to what was in TM are sort of more correct and more sort of balanced and correct. Just the power town is the best example. 8 victory points with power town seems right. But just going through it real quick. So you've got your 3 tool town. We did say in AOI tools we think are more valuable than they are in TM. And 3 tools is worth 9 URP plus the 4 victory points, which is a total of 13. Yeah, and Snake, what do you say? You think the science town should be a little higher URP since it's hard to use all the science steps? Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I will say, like, the value of the science steps sort of, it's an average, and you're never a good player will sort of work those science steps in the game to their advantage to maximize rewards, to maximize getting to the 9th step, etc., etc. So it is an average, so it's not really, perhaps this is an overvalue if each of those 4 steps, doesn't produce quite as much value. That said, I think it's, there are things you can do with it, of course. It's not, you can't forget the lowest science competency and things that it pairs nicely with, but that aside, the rest of it just sort of naturally kind of is like sort of 12, 13 URP each, and it just makes me feel kind of good that these things are valued correctly. So I won't like read them all out, but you get the idea here. Cool. So that's the town tiles. That's a relatively quick one. And then last one here is innovations. So I talked about it a little bit before. I'll just recap. I decided for the innovations to not sort of just rank, top half, bottom half, because they're used. There's like two distinct groups to me. They're sort of your early game innovations and your late game. And originally I was kind of thinking maybe it's sort of econ ones versus victory point ones, but there are some, a few early game sort of victory point ones too. So I think this is the correct kind of way to look at it. Happy to like hear what people think, but early game. So I was slightly like workshop is, I think we always kind of knew it was good. But maybe I was surprised that it's the best one. But from a pure kind of URP perspective, assuming you get it in round one here, the way I'm valuing it is, 5 rounds of income, that's 15 tools. And then, like I said before, for all of these neutral structures, what I'm doing is I'm saying that it gets you, in this case, 1/7 the way towards a town. So I chose the science reward town because it's the highest URP. And so I'm saying, 1/7 of the 7 victory points that you get from that is, 1 victory point, and then 1/7 of the 4 science steps is 0.6 science steps. That's kind of how I did that. You'll see as I go through 2 power kind of neutral structures like schools and guilds, I did it that way, and then 3 power ones like palace and university. That's where you'll see extra victory points and extra science steps for that. But workshop, really good. I actually didn't even know. Yeah, I know. Okay, we'll get Screw On. We'll get to steam power. I think that's what you mean. Yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. I also think it's arguably the best one, but just not really coming out in the URP. But one thing I'll just say really quick about workshops is like I didn't even realize that you can just get the innovation tile if you can't put it down. If you can't find a spot for it, then you can just take the 3 tools per turn, which sometimes is great anyway. So I thought I'd just mention that as a FYI. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, Snake. So like even if you don't place that dwelling, you can take away that 1.6 from victory points and science steps. It's a little bit more than 0.6 because you have to multiply it by science steps. But yeah, still a bit better than professors, according to this. But professors, it gives you mix. It gives you 18 victory points, pure. Hit the button 6 times if you get it in round 1. Plus, it gets you those 6 scholars. And the thing about professors that I think, you can pair it with a bunch of things like the right competency, round bonus tiles, as well as pass tiles, and just get a lot of points with those scholars. So that can kind of be a whole strategy or sub strategy in a game. So I think it's valued right at being number 2 or very high, but I think those scholars can turn into even more victory points. So let's move on to schools. So schools is a very popular round 1 innovation. And I'd sort of talked about this before. I think is doing a round 1 innovation good? Usually yes, but excuse me. I think the jury's out. It's not always the best thing. Sometimes it feels like a bit of a trap, but it can be good for sure. I just don't think it's an automatic. But anyway, schools can be great because it gets you that extra competency that you wouldn't otherwise have. So that is part of the value. It also, in this case, I'm assuming you're going to get the 1 tool and 1 science step competency. So I've kind of priced that all in. So seems kind of fine to be, a top 3 innovation. The one that just seems totally wrong to me here, and maybe someone can help me see what I'm missing, is Deus Ex Machina. To me, this thing is like strictly worse than Steam Power. It just is. So anyway, expect if you get it in round 1, you're going to get 6 digs from it. You'll get 4 science steps right away, 1 book right away. It's 35.1 URP. But Steam Power, it's just so powerful. So, the way that I valued it here is you get, the value of an upgrade for digging. So, 1 tool, 5 coins, 1 scholar. The value of an upgrade to sailing. So 4 coins and 1 scholar. Plus you get a scholar when you build it. And then you get the 2 victory points and the 2 books. I think this is potentially the best early game innovation. You just get so much tempo. I mean, you could end up having fully upgraded digs if you chose to upgrade your digs to sort of get the books to do this. Fully upgraded digs and 1 sailing, round 1, and just sort of dominate the board position. Mess with people. So yeah, I think URP isn't fully valuing it, but that's just kind of how it is right now. There's always context in this stuff. But yeah, I think it's stronger than Deus Ex Machina. So if someone can help me figure out how to properly value those intangibles around tempo around sailing, then just, I'm all ears. Okay, then there's guilds, and I always thought this was really quite cool in the beginning. 5 coins is a lot of coins for income, really useful, and I think it can be good, but it's just sort of not as good as the top 3, I'd say. Top 4, let's call it, with Steam Power in that bucket. But it does have some value, and in the right kind of board state, if in the right kind of faction, could be good. Trade routes. So this one I debated a little bit. Should this be in the late game bucket or the early game bucket? I think it's just not chosen particularly often. It's sort of hard to set up a game to keep guilds up. You tend to want to build a lot of schools, which makes it hard to keep your guilds up. But there's a world where you can really kind of get a bunch of victory points from this. I think it's the expected usage. Yeah, I agree. You can take it from round 2 to 5. Like it's, but as you get later, it's sort of like, I feel like it's a consolation prize compared to the victory points you might get from some of the ones you'll see in the late game. I agree with you, schools and early. Like there's a few of these that you don't really need that much time to really get the value out of it. But, just to keep it simple, I have the early game, late game. But trade routes is interesting. I think there's a world where this 20 victory points is pretty reasonable as like what you might get if you built it relatively early. It might just be worth, 6, 8, 12 if you build it late too. So not bad, but it kind of doesn't, to me, as a late game one, doesn't really compare to the 18 point-ish victory points you get in a lot of the late game ones. So interesting one. I wonder if we'll see in some situations people can really take advantage of it. Similar, like that book, that book action that gives you 2 victory points for every guild that you have up. Also, not really used that often. Often, maybe late game, sure, it gets used, but throughout the mid game, not so much, because it is just tough to keep guilds up. But anyway, interesting one. And then we've got Palace. So, this, to me, this could be actually early game, a quick way to sort of facilitate an early town. Also, totally fine to be a quick way to facilitate a late town. So, it's... I think I've seen people use this nicely when you have the big building pastel in the game too. You can sort of get an early 4, 8, even 12 victory points with that one when you combine it with Palace. So, you know, it's situationally can be useful, but I think to me it seems right to be on the lower end of the early game. And University, you know, also kind of a little janky, but the similar kind of situations with Palace can be good. I guess it has the advantage over Palace of giving you the 2 victory points per turn, but you kind of never want to build this round 1 because there's so many better options for round 1. So that's why I think that it's a little, the 2 victory point per round income is just sort of, you know, fine, but there's better things. So yeah, so that concludes sort of the early game innovations. Let's take a look at the late game. To me, the theme of the late game innovation tiles is that they're all good. They're all good. Of course, some like libraries is elite. It's you know, you can get up to 24 victory points for it, but I put 22 because usually you're kind of racing to kind of get it out there, and boy does it hurt when somebody gets it, even if they get it for, you know, 17 victory points. That's, the swing can be crazy because you were really counting on it, and maybe you're not set up to get the other ones. Maybe you don't have the right books. Maybe, yeah, it can be quite painful. That's why I didn't want to put the full 24 as the expected usage, but it is the elite victory point tile. Architecture, it did surprise me a little bit because, you know, it's only 10 victory points, but you do get those bumps up one track. So it can be a way to sort of steal a science track, which can be a big deal if you're looking at the swing versus an opponent. I put 5 here because I think it's, you know, reasonable to have 5 different shape structures. It could be higher, of course, could be less. I think that's a reasonable kind of amount. So put that all together, and overall URP, it's like 21.4. So I was surprised it was there, but yeah, it was, on second thought, you know, it can be really good. And then the rest, really, you know, there's the 18 victory point crowd. Census to me is just the easiest one to do. It's the requirement is just 11 instructors anywhere. Doesn't matter if they're connected. So that's like pretty, not that tough to do unless you're going pretty tall. Communications, a little trickier to sort of plan out. You might want to wait if you're like black and you haven't bridged for towns and that kind of thing. It could be sort of, you have to kind of make it work and plan out around it a little bit. Sewerage, you know, just build all your workshops. It's totally doable. It's not, you got to also have the resources and the planning to do it, but not that hard to get the full 18 victory points from it, but also fine to get a little less if that's the case. And steel, you know, 3 bridges, it doesn't care if the bridges are connected, like I think the engineers thing does in TM. And if you're black, then you're probably going to build 3 bridges, and there's probably other colors that'll do that sometimes. So it's kind of nice if you see that in your color that's going to be building bridges. It's sort of less contested for that 18 victory points. So that's kind of a nice thing. And then there's monument. So like I said before, part of the value of monument here, of course, is the 7 victory points, but then also the 4 structure neutral building. So I'm saying 4/7 of a town. That's 4/7 of the 7 points you get from a science town, and 4/7 of the 4 steps that you get from the science town tile. So 16.2, so like a little better than sort of the 15 victory point crowd, I'm calling it. So colleges, you know, typically you could get 15 victory points for your 3 schools that are out. If you happen to get the schools innovation too, it could be 20. It's kind of a nice thing, but situational, of course, because you have to have both of those innovations in the game and get them both. And League of Cities, also 15. Typically, I think three towns is pretty typical, but also totally plausible to get 4 towns, and I've definitely seen 5 towns as well. So it could be a monster. It could actually do more than libraries and get 25 victory points. So this list to me is less important as a ranking because you kind of just need, you're pretty happy with getting most of these. And yeah, I think that's, Snake, I think it's fair to say that colleges and legal cities could totally be better than Steel. It comes down to expected usage, and I think more times it's going to be worth 15, and sometimes it'll be worth more. So, yeah, I wouldn't disagree that you could put them with the ranking and call it 20-20. Maybe not colleges, because 20 is less common, but League of Cities, I could see it for sure. But yeah, to me, it's like it's less about the ranking, more about, you probably want to plan to maybe get one of these at some point. And sometimes this swing is is crazy. Like if you just sort of take one away from, if there's only like a few of these available, people are gunning for it, and you just get one, and somebody gets a substandard one. Maybe they get trade routes, and it's only giving them 6 to 8 victory points in the last round. That's a nice swing to do. Okay, well, listen, that's it. The whole URP. I think I've covered everything. I think you're saying sewerage has a higher upside in communications. Yeah, I guess so, because you could of course have the extra workshop. That's part of it. So arguably, I actually think probably communication should be lower than sewerage at the very least. I think it's a little harder to use than sewerage. You could argue it could be higher than census, but I just think in most games it's pretty situational to get that extra 2 VP from sewerage. So I'd put census above it. But yeah, I think there's some stuff that could be argued around reworking this a little bit. So I'm just going to recap here, and some of the, I will say, some of the, with changing spades and changing science steps, some of the previous stuff that I put out there has caused some shifts, minor shifts. I think factions a little bit, but nothing too crazy. But maybe I'll just really quick just go through, just flash competencies. So it didn't change the round 1 competencies for the double dig competency. It was still at the bottom. It did sort of change the rankings a little bit here in the last round. I think the annex one actually jumped up because I also gave annexes the value of 2/4 of a science town. It's helping you, have 2 less hexes towards a town. So that's another kind of thing that changed a little bit. The competency boost, I've sort of covered that a little bit already. I'm trying to think. Yeah, there was a little bit of shifting here from factions. Lizards went down a little bit because it had some digs that were priced a little differently, and I think probably monks and navigators went up a bit if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, but nothing too major in the overall one. I will say Omar being last feels kind of incorrect in a way. I think there's that extra leech and those 3 structures in the beginning that isn't fully captured by the URP. So to me, this feels a little incorrect. We already went through the palaces. We already went through town tiles and innovations. So tell me if I'm missing anything on the URP. Totally, this will get tuned and potentially again over time, but I think it's a pretty good resource to start. Oh, and there's just one slide here that I used for TMCon, the AOI tournament, just so people are aware of what changed versus the printed AOI and what's on BG. I think I captured all of it, but I think kind of useful. So my plan here is to publish this as a PDF, get it out there, and then probably follow up with like an Excel file that has all the calcs in the background. So hopefully people can kind of get some value from that too. But yeah, this was a fun thing to do. I'd kind of been working on it since we got the original copies of AOI delivered to us, played in person. It's sort of evolved over time, and it's been really fun. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope people get some use out of it, and definitely big thanks to people like Aaron Weber, sort of helped talk me through this. Kyle Muller, both sort of part of the TMCon group and my Ottawa Strategy board games group, and also like other thinkers that are out there, like the Zoras's of the world, who sort of inspired me. Yeah, so it's been a lot of fun, and definitely want to hear some feedback on what you'd like to see in the future in terms of strategy sessions, but glad to complete this one finally. All right, see you again soon for hopefully a game of AOI streaming online or something else, and have a good night.